Hey everyone, we have a special edition of the Chiro-Factor. What we decided to do is sit down with some chiropractic students. Now we've done this at other schools, but they've been mixed in with doctors, sometimes CA, sometimes we've had office managers or even spouses sit down when we do our live episode of the Chiro-Factor. But in this particular episode, we were outside of Dallas, and what we decided to do was sit down with some Parker students and just get a sense of what their questions were and what was causing them some trepidation. So you'll enjoy this podcast because you'll get a sense of what the students are looking at, and our questions that James and I give are really around success and what builds a successful practice. Many things that apply to the new grad apply to the regular doctor who's been in practice for many years. So I think everyone will enjoy this episode, not just the students. But to give respect and some time to the students, we thought it was important to do a special episode just with some Q&A and the student perspective. So there's many factors in healthcare, and we talk about these on a different level where there is science against anti-pharma. We talk about food and movement and what that does for your body or could hinder the body. But of course, the X factor, it's the Chiro-Factor. All right, everybody, welcome to a special edition. We are doing a student edition of the Chiro-Factor, and what's cool is we got a bunch of Parker students here. James and I are doing the Best Practices workshop tomorrow here in Dallas, and just to treat the students, we threw together some pizza and did a student night. And what's really cool is we're now going to do this as a Chiro-Factor student edition. We've also got some presidents of chiropractic schools we're going to be interviewing and just kind of get a flavor and a perspective of the profession. But as James was just describing to the students, there's modalities and add-ons and adjuncts that some chiropractors choose to do in their practice, but there is nothing as impactful as the adjustment. And we're going to talk about the science and the research this weekend with the docs at Best Practices, but even sharing that with the students, realizing there's many factors in health, and oftentimes the X factor is what we call the Chiro-Factor, and that's your adjustment. So studio audience, if you wouldn't mind, put your hands together. Let's make some noise. We're going to get this party started. All right. And we've got Noah up here for the first question. Noah's question has something to do with evidence. It was basically, what are the biggest misconceptions students have in regards to chiropractic research? And so I want you to kind of ask that in your own words, and then I'm basically going to throw that one over to James.
Yes, with chiropractic research, a lot of students, they seem to have a misconception, kind of stay away from it. And I was just wondering what you've seen in your research.
Well, I'm not a researcher, so I'll say what I've seen in the research I read and critique. And the biggest misconception, as I think I stated to start tonight, was that a lot of chiropractic students somehow are given the impression that the adjustment lacks evidence and the other things that are in the marketplace in terms of spinal health care, they have more evidence. And I think people get confused between things that have more acceptance or are more commonly used and things that actually have more valid evidence of clinical effectiveness. And what I can assure you is that the chiropractic adjustment is the most evidence-based intervention for non-cancerous, non-infectious, non-traumatic instability spinal health care in the world. And there's no close second. Exercise would be second, but it would not be a close second in terms of the level of evidence.
Yeah, and we have this list now. It's a running list. We call them Chestnut isms. You can imagine who says them, right? And one of the Chestnut isms that I like is this idea of acceptance versus evidence. Now, could something have more acceptance? For sure. Does it have more evidence? It's a different question. Does that make sense? It's also like titles and evidence. So I saw Aaron Siri doing something with, politicians and talking about some of the studies that are out there. And he said, I'm not here to look at titles of who said what. I'm here for the evidence. I'm an attorney and I got to work on evidence, not on titles and diplomas. And so kind of the same idea of, what's accepted and what is evidence-based. And I think if you realize the impact the adjustment has, that's got to be the most important thing in any chiropractic office. And when we were talking to a historian of sorts, Lou Sportelli, who was big on Wilk versus the AMA, one of the things he pointed out is years ago, no matter how you chose to practice and the other kinds of things you might have in your practice, we all agreed that everybody was going to adjust. And the thing that brought chiropractors together was the adjustment. Now, times have changed, and that's certainly different, but I think the misconception for students sometimes is there isn't enough evidence, or we don't have this huge body of evidence. And it is growing, but at the same time, there's evidence out there that really shows the benefits of chiropractic care. And we talked about the Manga study previously, but a couple of things that I'd like to point out after you point out the science, the research, and the data from that, is one of the things they found out is that the patients were happier under chiropractic care than traditional medical care. It was safer and it was more cost effective. It's like, so how do you have happier people, safer care, and more cost effective? And then the province of Ontario didn't follow through with it. How do you disregard that information when actually the customer is getting the best of all of it? And so, again, acceptance versus evidence, I think, is really where the conversation has shifted. That has confused some chiropractic students.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, if you're not aware of the evidence, then, it's an unknown, as I always say. So you don't know what you don't know. But, since Manga in 93, we've had, at least a dozen, really well-designed, good studies that show chiropractic is not just effective, but it's superior. In fact, you can almost not find a head-to-head usual chiropractic care versus usual medical care since the Bishop study in 2010, which, showed they were, I think it was 2,700% better than usual medical care. And 78% of those people in medical care were still on opioids. They were still being prescribed opioids after, 16 weeks. And the chiropractor only got the patients for 4 weeks. But the usual medical care group got to give them as much care of any kind that they wanted for 16 weeks. And the chiropractors had to stop their care after 4 weeks, but the outcomes were measured at 16 weeks. So all the chiropractic patients, I mean, who would design such a...
Right.
Anyway, it gets me angry. But
yeah.
And so I think that, every chiropractic student should be aware of the clinical evidence for what they do. And I think also you should be aware of the clinical evidence for your competitors in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Because for a couple of reasons. One is, when you're aware of how little evidence there is for everything else, I think that's important for you to communicate to your patients honestly. And the other one is you need to be aware of what you're referring out to. Because, as I always joke, the answer to 9 out of 10 questions on the board exam review is refer out.
Right.
And so, but if you refer out generally because you feel like the best chance for the patient isn't more of your care, it's someone else's care. Mm-hmm. But if you're referring out to something that has no evidence, and you're referring out after only a little bit of time under chiropractic care, then you're doing a great disservice to your patient and to your practice.
Yeah. So that study's 2010 Bishop, and the medical group got care for 16 weeks. The chiropractic group got care for 4 weeks, and the outcomes were still superior for chiropractic care. So just for a straight give for the listeners, we're going to have a lot of students listening to this. 2010 Bishop study, I've heard you reference that a number of times. It's massive. They gave them longer care in a quote-unquote head-to-head matchup. Chiropractic got less time, 4 weeks versus 16 weeks, and we still beat them. But even that design study, that we'd have to say that would be an odd design.
There was chiropractors involved in the design of that study, and it's actually incomprehensible to me how ridiculous the design of these studies. They're designed to make chiropractic fail.
Right.
And they give 2 or 3 adjustments, and then they measure outcomes from 4 to 6 to 8 weeks to months after that. So, it can't be by these people are either diabolically stupid, or they're diabolically evil and dishonest.
Yeah.
Because it can't be, it can't be anything else. Maybe they're both.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say they're both. So, no, that was a great kickoff. Thanks for getting him fired up. I really appreciate it. We always need help in that department. So if you wouldn't mind, what we're going to do, students, is we're going to have you stand up, give a round of applause, and I'm going to ask the next person to come to the mic, but we'll let you stretch your legs. Go ahead and stand up. Put your hands together. Let's hear it from Noah. All right, stay standing. Our next question's from Nate. Is Nate Roberts here? All right, come on up. Nate the Great. Nate said, is it ethical to run a practice that doesn't include rehab exercises or passive modalities? What is the most evidence-based chiropractic approach to healthcare? Nate, I'm going to let you ask that in your own terms. Is that, in fact, your question?
Well, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said that the adjustment is the most evidence-based intervention that we can do. So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. When interpreting evidence, what are some things that you look at that kind of, will tell you, okay, this study they're just kind of making stuff up here? Or like a lot of the words that we get on the studies that they give us at school are, authors conclude that this intervention may, so I just kind of want to know what you
that's
look
actually
at.
standard. Even if your results were astronomically, the outcomes were astronomical. Generally in science, what we say is we hypothesize, usually in the negative, meaning we're assuming it's not going to work. You test the null hypothesis, and then you generally say, well, there's no perfect design of any study, so you usually say may. That's pretty standard, actually.
Okay.
But to be clear on a couple of things, what Brad and I don't do, and what I especially never do, is I never tell people how to practice or tell them what not to do in practice.
Yeah.
What I say is, people come to me because they ask me what's the level of evidence for intervention X, Y, or Z, and I'll be honest with them no matter what. But that doesn't mean to say that I, think that your clinical judgment is not good, or that you shouldn't do anything other than the adjustment. I've never said that. Mm-hmm. What I've said is the bullseye of your practice for any healthcare intervention, the bullseye of your care protocol should be the things that have the most evidence, that provide the best statistical chance for the best outcomes for the patient. That should be the only thing that's in the center of that bullseye. That's where you start with every patient, no matter what, because that's the best statistical chance. Now, if you want to add some evidence-informed things on the outside of that evidence-based circle, now some people don't have anything to put in the evidence-based circle, like everybody else. Yeah. But other than maybe as we said, tell them to go home and exercise. But if you want to add some things on the outside of that circle, that's clinical preference. That's us not ever getting in the way of anybody using their clinical experience.
Yeah.
But if the question is what's evidence-based, then that's a question that we can answer objectively.
Yeah.
And we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're saying is everybody should get adjusted, assuming they have clinical indicators for the need of an adjustment, which are restriction and allodynia. So if they have those things, they should get an adjustment.
Yeah.
If they don't have those things, I'm not sure why they're at the chiropractor, but
right. Yeah, and just to be fair, you said you've already been to the best practices.
Yes, sir.
Seminar. Was that one of the best ways to see the clinical evidence put into practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huge, right? And so taking theory and then seeing it put into practice,
Mm-hmm.
but also pro-adjustment evidence put into practice. And then all of a sudden, what I find is when we describe it to people, they go, well, why would I do all those therapies if that's what the research shows? I go, I don't know. So, kind of deconstructing the case. I'm not talking people out of it or telling them how to practice, but if I make you question things and you can't come up with solid answers, then maybe those are the things we let go, right? And so a lot of it for me is if I challenge you and you don't have a solid answer, then maybe that's something you can let go. It's not solid for your practice.
Right.
Your question specifically was, is it ethical to do non-passive therapies for people? And I'm going to tell you 100% because I got the recipe for ice. I mean, just freeze some fucking water, bro. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, and that's what I say at my health class, minus the F-bomb. But I tell people, I go, if you need ice, I have the recipe. Right? And patients look at me, and every now and then someone will raise their hand. I'm like, don't ask it. It's frozen water. They're like, yeah, I thought so. Like, that's so easy. I'm like, so you don't need me to do it, right? What about hot packs? I'm like, don't do this. You know what I mean? It's like not being adversarial with my patients, but it's the same idea. Where's the evidence for that? Where's the evidence? And also there's things that they couldn't do at home. They can do. Mm-hmm. And then there's things they should do at home, like exercise. It's not my job to work you out. It's your job. And so some of that stuff really, I think what's considered passive is really borderline active. And I think it's just homework for the patient. It's not something the doc has to do. Getting into the adjustment itself, yeah, for sure. That's the most reprogrammable for the body. That's the most benefit for the patient. We always talk about what's best for the patient for best statistical chance of healing, and economically, it's still the adjustment. So to me, I think that's huge.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people probably use those modalities because they learned often at school that there's evidence for them, and so they're not doing it just for greed or money. They actually truly believe that they have a benefit. Sadly, some believe it has more of a benefit than the adjustment, which is a shame. But also, if we just step back a little bit and we go, well, what's the real problem if we're saying we're going to address the cause, because I think we can all agree that's a good idea. So what's the real issue these people have when they come into our office? And the answer is they have a deficiency of segmental motion. They have a deficiency of afferent input. into the sensory motor pathways, right? And so how is a modality going to restore segmental motion? How is fusion surgery going to reestablish segmental motion? How is a drug going to reestablish segmental motion? Like if you just step back a little bit instead of just, because sometimes I think, we can get so stuck in the chiropractic lens, but if we just get out of the chiropractic lens, we just use our logic. Like truly the problem is lack of mobility, segmental especially. So if that's the problem, which everybody in all, and not outside of chiropractic goes, yeah, that's a huge issue. That's why they rehab an ankle for 6 weeks at least. Even if it doesn't hurt, they just keep going because they got to get the proprioception back. They do, of course. And so it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. The spine has more proprioceptors, more higher dose because it's got a higher concentration, especially in the upper neck. So, so if we just go, well, what are we trying to accomplish? And what we're trying to accomplish is to reestablish that motion unit function.
Right.
But that motion unit function can only be reestablished if you reestablish segmental motion. So those other things can't do that. So now you're like, okay, that's more relaxing. It's just a little bit easier to talk about, I think.
The neurobiomechanics.
Yeah, neurobiomechanics, 100%.
And why should we say it that way versus just biomechanics?
Because biomechanics do not exist, because bio means biology, life, and there are no mechanical movements in life without neurology.
Chestnutism. That's how that works. Bam! Any other questions, Nate? Anything else you want to add to that?
Just what makes a good study?
A good study, everything is about the question. The question you ask first, and then this is how I always explain it to people. So if you took a grade 2 class and said, design a study on whether or not plants need water, they could all do it. Right? We're going to give some plants water and some plants not. It's really easy actually when you think about it. But then what statistics you use to, that you run it through. But the most important part of studies are always the question that you ask. What question do you want answered? And then when you get the results, how do you apply those results to real life or clinically? But neither of those two things have anything to do with science. You can't conduct a scientific study to figure out which question to ask in a scientific study. And you can't conduct a scientific study to figure out how to apply the results of a scientific study. So that's where philosophy comes in, and that's why we should be asking different questions, because we're asking address the cause questions in chiropractic, at least we're supposed to. Mm-hmm. But in terms of research methodology in the study, so if you're doing a comparator study where you want to know if chiropractic has a better, elicits better outcomes than something else, well then you have to be fair. You have to have a fair dose of chiropractic. You have to have the patients are similar in terms of their condition or their age or their, all factors that any variable that you think of that could affect the outcome, you have to try to control for that. And the way you control for it in a study is you make it the same in both groups. Mm-hmm. And so this is the problem with most studies. Either they don't have a proper control at all, like most of these modality studies, any of the studies that show a benefit, they have no proper placebo comparator, or they're underpowered in terms of number of people. Because if you're looking for something for a change, you have to, statistical methods mean that, depending on how rare or common the event is, you have to have a certain number of people to be able to pick that up. And so that's what you look for in a study. You look, if it's a comparator study, you say, okay, did they give a proper dose of care? If you're just asking the question is, does chiropractic effective? Well, then you have to have a proper dose of chiropractic care. The patients have to be realistic patients that you see in a chiropractic office. The outcomes have to be measured at a reasonable time after, or you have to give some kind of maintenance care after the Senator Macaulay study shows, And then if it's comparing chiropractic to something else, well, then you have to have an equal and fair dose of those two things, and each group should be very similar in terms of the characteristics of the patient. It's really freaking simple, mm-hmm. right? And then you run a proper statistical analysis, which really isn't the biggest part of it, to be honest with you. But then you have to look at that study and say, okay, what was the question they asked? What were the actual results? So I could care less what the conclusion is. I could care less. The first thing I always go to a study is the design, mm-hmm. and then I look at the results, and I want to see the raw data, because I don't want them to be reporting absolute versus relative or any of the bullshit. I need to go and look at the actual raw data of what the outcomes were, and then I can tell from that whether or not their conclusion was valid based on the data that the study produced.
Yeah.
And that's really the the best way to do it.
Even those terms, absolute versus relative, like those are familiar terms I think students should know in chiropractic school, because that's how drug companies lie with statistics. We talked about cholesterol in a previous episode, absolute versus relative. Absolute, there's no change. Relative to, something else, well, then all of a sudden it's a 33% change for cholesterol. And it's like, wait a minute, the actual number is 1%. It's like, so they can lie with numbers. And again, people argue you can't lie with the numbers. I go, politicians do it all the time. You just change one of the axes and they go, jobs are up over the last 3 years or the last 3 months. In 3 months, they're up. Yeah, but for 3 years, it's tanked. So compared to what? Well, 3 months, we're on the uptick. It's a little bit compared to what's happened for 3 years. Yeah. And so those sound bites, I think, kind of help people understand some of the baseline. Feeding plants water versus not water, very basic, but that's a good essence of how does science work? Well, these are the questions. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, the better the question, the better the study, right? And that's huge.
And I think another really thing is because most people don't understand the lack of evidence for most chronic for medical intervention for chronic illness, right? Like they are devoid. Even as we talk about past editors of New England Journal of Medicine, and Doshi, who's the current, I believe, chief editor,
coming out and speaking against them,
just saying like they're garbage. Like there's a million studies and no valid evidence, right? But I always use this example just to give people an understanding of how important philosophy is in research, right? Because it's all about the question you ask. So I always use the plant analogy, and I just go, so imagine you had plants that were wilting. So if your question was, does intervention X result in less wilting of plants? Can it treat the symptom of wilting? And let's just say that your intervention was water. So one group of plants you gave water, and the other group of plants you didn't give water, correct? And at the end of your study period, let's call it 6 weeks, doesn't matter, whatever, 4 weeks, there was both groups of plants were still wilting. In the allopathic philosophy paradigm,
allopathetic.
Yeah, but what your conclusion would be is that water is of no use to wilting plants. But if you understood that, how ridiculous that is, plants need water. Whether or not a plant can get rid of wilting is a stupid question. The question is, do plants need water? And are they sicker without water than with it? What's the answer?
Yeah, they're sicker.
Right. So why would they still be wilting? Well, if you're only studying one thing, they're trying to make it so reductionist, you would never think about it. Well, maybe they don't have enough sunlight. So now you go, and if you just studied sunlight alone, you get the same answer. So now you've got a real water group with fake sunlight. You've got real sunlight with fake water. You've got two fakes, right?
Right.
And then you do your study, and at the end of it, they're all still wilting. What's the conclusion? If your question is, are these things, the only way they're useful is that they stop wilting, now you could conclude that neither water nor sunlight has any value to wilting plants. And yet all the plants would surely die without a sufficient amount of both. But if your question is whether it can stop wilting versus whether or not the plant needs it to epigenetically express healthy structure and function, you could say they have no value. Why are they still wilting? Right. Well, maybe there's not enough nutrients in the soil. So now you got a bunch more groups, but they're still wilting. And you're like, healthy nutrients, water, and sunlight are useless. Anybody who offers that is a quack. These things have no value clinically. And then you're like, what? Well, maybe someone's dumping diesel fuel into the water supply. That's why they're all wilting.
What a dick.
Yeah. So yeah. So you have to, but this is the understanding is that the question's everything. So if you say, well, chiropractic didn't cure cancer, it's no good for cancer patients. Well, but that's a stupid question. Right. The question is, do they need a healthy moving spine? And is a human with a healthy moving spine healthier than a human without a healthy moving spine? The answer is unequivocally yes. Right. But whether or not that could cure a disease that has multi-factors is a stupid question. Right. But that's how they try to test chiropractic. Right. And so that's where the philosophy comes in.
And even on the positive side of that, like you and I have discussed this before, having a cup of coffee, it's like, they design a study with 4 chiropractic adjustments. Is the patient better? Yes, they are. Okay, well, the question is the patient better? And after 4 adjustments, they're better. Are they their best? Are they optimal? No, but the question was, is it better?
Are they still in pain? Yes,
right.
But they're less pain than they were to start.
And so those are some of the studies that are coming out, just so the listeners understand, right? Those are some of the studies that are coming out to devalue the adjustment. And you and I have talked about this, where they're devaluing the SMT because they're like, oh, well, in 4 visits they could feel better. In 5 visits, like, yeah, the problem with chiropractic is it works. And the truth is, if you're asking, is it better? It is. Is it optimal? No, it's not optimal. Is that the best? No. But if the question was that and you got that answer, and it's the same idea with the wilting plants. It's like, look, when you start asking the specific question to what you want to find out, you have to be really careful how you extrapolate that answer. And I see this a lot too, where they talk about the objective data and then someone gives their subjective opinion, and it's like, it's been amazing, it's been terrific. And you're like, wait a minute, people died in this study. Like, like the subjective part of it, the conclusion, that's always the piece. I'm like, how did they write those words based on this data and information? And that kind of ties into like the pharmaceutical model and vaccines and some of that. It's like, that's where you really start to see that go off the wire. But it's the same methodology he's talking about to interpret that in your practice.
Let me give you one really good example, okay? Because I actually critique systematic reviews, right? Because I go look at all the studies that they cite, and the systematic reviews are brutal in terms of like misrepresenting the data. Anyway, but the most highly rated study in the history of SMT is a study by Hancock et al. Hancock. If you look at the JADD scale rating for any study for SMT, it's the highest rated by far. And in every systematic review, it's always the highest rated. I think it gets an 8. It's the highest. And the reason it gets an 8 is because they included drugs in the study, and they could double blind. Right, so it gets a higher rating than studies that you can't double, because you can't double blind the chiropractor, but you could double blind the chiropractor on whether they got a drug or not. So anyway, so this study is very often used to say, well, chiropractic was really no better than giving NSAIDs or a paracetamol, right? There was no extra benefit from chiropractic. And actually what they say in the study is, and also, there's some danger to chiropractic. And so why would you do it when these things are just as good as SMT?
Dicks.
Just lying, fraudulent, scumbag mother truckers, right? And so I go and I look at this, and I go, I better read that study. So the first thing I find out is that the study was done in Australia, by the way, frickin' Aussies, But anyway, it was done by physical therapists, and the intervention for SMT, over 97% of the patients got a mobilization from a physical therapist, and they called that SMT. Then, in the study, they have a quote. I'll never forget it. It's number 4. It's number 4. I'll never forget it. And they used number 4 in their reference where they said, the literature is clear, there's no difference based on the practitioner providing the care or whether or not it's a mobilization or a thrust manipulation. And the reference to that was number 4. And I was like, I know for sure that's not true, because I have like loads of information to show that the thrust is a big deal, right? Not the cavitation, but the thrust. And so I look it up, and it's actually a paper by Rubenstein et al., which is a paper on fucking NSAIDs. It has nothing to do with anything about showing that a mobilization is the same. And this is the highest rated study. So I want you to understand, when they rate a study on the JADD scale, you could give one adjustment and then measure the outcomes a year later and get a 10 out of 10 on the JADD scale. It has nothing to do with a fair dose of care. It's all about study design and whether or not they're blinded or not. So this study, which is the highest rated, right, and often used to downgrade the level of evidence for SMT,
right,
is a mobilization study by physical therapists.
Which, what I want to point out to the students here, what he's really pointing out is almost an inside attack on chiropractic care, because now they have PTs doing a mobilization, calling it an SMT, which typically is reserved for chiropractors for a specific and scientific adjustment, also labeled an SMT. So when you start to downregulate the definition of that term, right, to where anybody can do it, trained or untrained, chiro or non-chiro, the writing's on the wall. They're trying to dilute, in my opinion. That's just an opinion.
No, it's 100% fact. Like, I can tell you that if you go look at these systematic reviews, first of all, they're doing more and more studies with fewer and fewer interventions in terms of adjustments or mobilizations. They're doing more and more SMT studies now. They're flooding the market. They're flooding the zone with mobilization SMT studies of 2 or 3 visits, and then pooling that into the systematic reviews. So the heterogeneity of the studies increase because some work and some don't. The thrust ones do, the non-thrust ones don't. Look at the Hidalgo review, Hidalgo, they're the one who controlled for that. And then so now you got this big pool of data of 2 or 3 mobilizations into the pool of data on SMT. So it lowers the overall rating of the effectiveness of SMT. If you think that's by accident,
which affects everybody in this room,
you're out of your mind. It's not possible it's by accident.
Right.
And so, and then the
it's an assault on the profession.
100%. And then the other thing and we go along with it seemingly. Not seemingly, we go along with it. And then the other thing you'll see is now it's like, well, we want to collaborate and integrate. So let's look at what's the effect of SMT plus usual medical care versus usual medical care alone. They never do a direct comparison anymore, right? Especially since the Bishop study.
Never between chiropractic
and lo and behold, what do they find out? Well, the SMT plus usual medical care is better than usual care alone. No shit.
Right.
Usual medical care is useless, actually worse, negative efficacy, harmful. Right? And so all the benefits from the SMT and the SMT plus usual medical care. So why do you need the usual medical care?
Right. Just throw it out.
Because we want to be accepted, because we don't want to come across and say what you do doesn't work. It's diabolical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Since you were at the Best Practice Seminar, what would you say as a student, what would be your encouragement for people at some point to make it to that workshop?
Like the confidence that I came back to school with after that, just knowing that what we do isn't just like may or may not be true. Like you really do come back from that seminar with like the fire in your gut and you say, let's go, so that was the biggest takeaway from me.
Awesome. Yeah, what you don't come back with is that you can guarantee patients is going to work. What you come back with is, of all the available interventions, ours is by far giving them the best statistical chance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So to be clear, we're not telling people that you can guarantee anything and that chiropractic works every time for everybody. What we're saying is, statistically speaking, they have a far greater chance of getting better from enough care from you than they do from anybody else.
And the only risk I would add to that is not providing enough care.
Amen.
Under-recommending, underutilizing.
Very common.
Very common. Giving enough care. That's my biggest concern for students is, are you recommending enough visits? Not the idea of, we're getting it done in 4 visits. So,
and evaluate. Like after 12 visits, reevaluate. They should be responding, obviously.
For sure. So I noticed all throughout this conversation, every time we said something good, you looked over just to make sure the notes were getting taken down. So I wish you luck over there, okay? One thing I want you to write down, just write down, Glow is great. Put that in the notes over there. Nate, get off the microphone. Put your hands together for Nate. Let's hear it.
Thank y'all.
You got it.
Thanks, Dr. Glow.
You got it.
Dr. Chestnut. Thank you.
Hey, this is probably a good time to jump in and just say, if you are a student, I think there's 3 ways out of school. One could be a franchise. You could take a job, learn to adjust some people, but usually that is a short-term plan. If you want to open your practice, and that is the dream, I always encourage students, keep the dream alive. However, there's oftentimes a step in between opening your own practice and really being prepared to do so. And oftentimes it's what we call the incubator. Now, if you want to be an associate, or as we call it, the apprentice, then you can learn from a master. You can learn from the wizard. So if you want to be an apprentice, have an associateship for a couple of years, what I do within Level Up, with the help of Dr. Eric Russell, is we place qualified students with $1 million practices or $2 million practices that are running systems the students can learn, and then at the end of the 2 years, go and open their dream practice. If you want to get right out of school and open your dream practice, I cannot recommend enough following the 0 to 200 formula that Ryan Carlson and myself have built for new grads to open their dream practice. So realistically, there's 2 ways out. One, you can message myself, Dr. Glow DC, on Instagram, and I'll put you in touch with what we call the Cupid, because Eric Russell makes the love connection from graduates and docs in practice, again, that have highly successful $1 million practices, $2 million practices. We even have some docs in the U.S. over $3 million. So if you want to be an apprentice and have a mentor that's going to show you the ropes and be paid to learn, message myself and I'll put you in touch with the Cupid, Eric Russell. If you want to get out on a blueprint and open your practice in a paint-by-numbers system, then by all means, ask for your graduation present to be the 0 to 200 Practice Accelerator program, where you get right out of school, open your practice. So ask your family and friends to help you with that purchase, because it is the way for your total freedom. Again, 2 ways out: be an associate, we can help you, or open your own practice, we can definitely help you. Either way, if I can be a part of your future and you are a student, let me know. Dr. Glow DC is where I am on Instagram. Shoot me a message there. And of course, hit follow while you're at it so we can communicate back and forth. And I'll be happy to help you out in whatever way possible. Now back to the episode. All right. So our next question is going to come from, who do we say? We've got Stephanie Miller and then Claire Beck. Is Stephanie here? All right. If you guys wouldn't mind, stand up, put your hands together. Let's hear it for Stephanie Miller. Right on. Did you talk to ERUS? Was this your question, or did you pre-submit this?
I pre-submitted that one.
Okay, so this one was, what is your best advice you can give to a chiropractic student who is just graduating and stepping into the real world of chiropractic? And if you have a second part to that or something you want to send to Dr. Russell, you can also ask that as well.
Awesome.
All right, so however you want to rephrase that or phrase that, you're welcome to do that.
So yeah, our graduation ceremony is a month from today.
Right on.
And yeah, stepping out into the real world of chiropractic real soon. You make it through school, they prepare you for boards, they prepare you to get licensed through the state, but do they really prepare you for the real world to be a successful chiropractor? So what insight do you have to give?
I mean, a lot of what we've seen I've been in practice for 28 years. James has been a chiropractor for over 30 years. How long have you been?
No, 26.
25? Oh, okay.
I'm a lot younger than that.
Oh, okay. I couldn't tell. But I think, some of it's changed over the years. When we first graduated, kind of like the option out was you go and open your own practice. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of quote unquote jobs or associates, in my opinion. You could do that, but pretty much it was kind of like you get out, and majority of the people, 78%, would go and open a practice. And now I think that's flipped completely, where like there's probably 20% that go and open their own practice, 80% go and work for somebody else. So I think the model has kind of shifted a little bit as to what that looks like. And one of the things we've done is I have one of my previous associates, Ryan Carlson, we filmed his opening of his practice in Arkansas. We released these videos just for students. They're free. There's 3 free videos on what to look out for, mistakes to avoid, things when you go to open your own practice. But it's all evidence-based. It's all the information James has provided over the years. I provide the procedures. And it's basically for a new grad, how to run a practice. Now, I don't have a comparative statement. I don't know what's taught at each and every school. I don't know what's taught at Parker specifically. I just know in the model that we teach, where it's chiropractic-centric, these are the things you need to have in place. These are the pillars that need to be done. And again, that's not a comparison because I don't really know what goes on inside the classrooms. I just know from talking to the students, a lot of them lack the confidence. They don't have an understanding of the business and the finances. I know the money, as of the time of this recording, is harder for chiropractic graduates to get. So there's a lot of variables that are out there, and some of that's outside the school's hands. They don't know what your credit score is. They don't know who a co-signer is. They don't know what your particular student debt is. And I joke about students marrying students in school, but that's a bad financial move most of the time. I mean, it's just like, it's $600,000 in debt, and all of a sudden, if you want to have a family, it's like, wait a minute, that's a big deal. So, to me, I always work with a sense of urgency, and to me, it's like you got to make every day count. And there's 24 hours in a day, so you guys get to work half days when you get out of school. It doesn't matter if it's the first 12 hours or the second 12 hours of the day, but I would get in the habit of working 12-hour days, 6 days a week the first year. Work really hard, and then it gets easy, as opposed to taking it nice and easy. And then in a couple of years, it's hard for the rest of your career, So any student that you can message me on Instagram, it's Dr. Glow DC. Ask for the 3 free videos, how to open your practice. Mostly what it consists of is mistakes to avoid. And we did this based on my previous associate, worked for me for 2 or 3 years, Ryan Carlson. I teach with him. But we filmed the opening of his practice, which turned out to be right before COVID. So we didn't even know how bulletproof we were making his office. And then things started shutting down as he opened, and he still collected $1 million in the first 12 months, collected $2 million in the first 24 months. So he collected, I should say that differently, he collected $3 million in the first 24 months, but $1 million the first 12 months and then $2 million the next year. It's a model for students to follow that is unlike anything in the profession. James and I have been teaching procedures and evidence-based, and we've had conversations with Ryan. I always joke, I'm like, it's not like he's tall, dark, and handsome. I mean, it's not like the charisma. It's just that he's working off the right recipe, and the confidence of what James teaches, that's imperative. It's a bedrock of what you have to do. And so I think the questions are really, do you have the confidence? Do you feel it's adjustment-centric? Do you feel your communication skills are up to snuff? And a lot of that's individual based on the student graduating. not necessarily did you go to the right school. Because if you went to this school, you're set. But if you went to that school, you're screwed. Look, there's good graduates at every school. And there's also students from every college campus that don't make it in chiropractic and do something else. So, really what it comes down to is the individual. And so there's no guarantee either way, detriment or benefit, that this school guarantees success. You got to do your bit. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but the 3 free videos, I'll send them to you guys. Who would want them? Raise your hand if you would want. Let's see what those. It's awesome. We filmed it in Arkansas, and people are like, "Why are you going to Arkansas?" I'm like, "Well, we're filming this thing, and here's what we have." And the lead chiropractor is like, "He's never going to make any money there." I'm like, "Actually," and this is a quote. Can you put this in the notes for me, Nathan?
You got
now that you're writing them down over there, where you live mentally is more important than where you live physically. And for a lot of students, it's not the region you move to that makes you successful. Just like the school you graduate from doesn't guarantee success. You got to have it between your ears. And some of that's confidence, and some of it's the knowledge, the communication, and just putting it together. And then I know it's possible. I know it is. And that's without gimmicks and gadgets. And so for me, that's a really big one to just kind of hammer home is like, yeah, you can absolutely be successful right across the stage. Work is required. Struggle is not. And that's a big piece of that too. Yeah. What was your second question, the other part of that?
Do you guys have any course laid out to kind of change the curriculum and how you want to incorporate more evidence-based coursework for chiropractors?
You mean in schools?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a James question.
Well, the nice thing, I guess, since COVID is that I haven't had to say no to being offered a job at a school because I couldn't take the pay cut, no offense, but... and I probably don't work well with others other than Brad and Rick. Yeah, so I am now delivering 12 hours of evidence-based content in Scotland and also a school in Barcelona and soon probably Australia. So that's been kind of neat for the students, I think, to just get that little boost of confidence, But to be honest, the educational side of things is it's life sucking for me. I got to be honest with you. It's just that I don't enjoy it. I find that there's a lot of things like CE that really control the curriculum that have nothing to do with becoming a good chiropractor, and it's not the mountain I want to die on. I'd rather deal with chiropractors and really help them. But if I can get stuff into schools, I got to record the lecture, so I don't have to be there. I'm always willing to do that. And it's certainly not for the money at these chiropractic colleges, believe me. But it's like I feel like that's kind of giving back a little bit. And one of the things I would like to say, if I could just go back to your first question a little bit,
Please.
is the most valuable thing I've ever learned in my life is that success leaves clues. And so if you want to, wherever you decide you're going to practice. Oh, by the way, and also like love conquers all. So if you both got $300,000 in debt, just work it out. If you're with your soulmate, don't worry. I cannot say that.
He's a softy deep
I
down,
believe that
yeah.
totally. I do believe that. If you're with the right person, it works. But as my dad says, the rich ones need loving too. But
Back on track. On track.
I always thought that was sage advice. I didn't follow it, but I
Back
thought
on track.
Yeah. Sorry. That's a Chuckism. My dad's name's Charlie. So anyway, the best thing about Brad for me, and the reason that I agreed to like kind of like travel around, because I hate travel these days because I did so much of it, but is because Brad is successful. And he does leave a lot of clues, and he's organized his clues in a way that are formulaic, and you can follow it. So, hey, listen, it might not resonate with you, but if what we're talking about kind of resonates, and that's kind of like the practice you like to have, well, Brad has that practice, right? And he's helped a lot of other people have that practice. So it's a proven formula for success. And so what I would say is get in touch with Brad and help you find somebody who you could go practice with, who's not going to, use you as a way to boost their income, but is somebody who's going to teach you and mentor you how to become successful, and realizing that eventually you're going to go out on your own, right? If you so choose. And so I think that's really important. Like Rick and I always joke, we bought a practice with no patients, and a good buddy of ours who's just a dick. He bought a practice with 350 patients a week with a building for the same price that we paid to build out and buy all the new equipment, right? And he'd phone us all the time, how you guys doing? We're like, because he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm a down week. I was only 349 this week. And we're like, we had 6. because we just opened up and it was like, anyway. And so I think that's the value. That's the value. Like the evidence is huge for your confidence in order to implement the stuff that he's going to teach you, because you might be hesitant if you didn't know for sure that it was best for the patient. Like a lot of people are very moral and they don't want to just tell people something that's not true to make money. Those are the people I like to deal with. Right. I hate the scumbags. But you're not more moral because you give less care. That's a fallacy. That's just like one of these things that is just driven into your subconscious that is not true.
That is a Chestnutism. You are not more moral because you give less care. And that's rampant on chiropractic school campuses.
Right. And so you're not more moral because you give more care either. You're moral when you give the right amount of care based on a proper exam and whether or not there's clinical indicators for the need for your care.
Nobody can argue with that.
No. And so, and I would just really encourage all the graduates, like, if you can, go do an internship, right? Yeah. Like, don't go, like, start at least a year with somebody where you're going to make a decent amount of money, right? But you're going to learn and you're going to, and be hungry, like chop wood. I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to say that you're going to work your ass off. It's okay.
Yeah.
You'll learn so much. You'll learn a work ethic. It's like, it's just good for you to work your arse off.
Yeah.
And you're going to have tremendous rewards if you do it.
And this isn't the first question we've had. We had some pre-submitted questions on this. So I'll kind of unpack that a little further, because number one, you can get out and go work for a major franchise, a big box company, something like The Joint. I'm just not a huge fan of that. Their busiest day at The Joint is Sundays. Anybody in here want to work 12 hours on a Sunday? Yeah, me neither. And that's when they see over 100 visits on a Sunday. So I just don't love that for new grads. It works for some people. You're in a tough spot financially. You're waiting for your loved one at school to finish graduating. You got a year. Like, all right, that could work. It's just not my favorite model. Option number two is you go mentor someone. And we've mentioned Eric Russell earlier in this podcast. Eric Russell works for me to basically take awesome graduates and only put them with $1 million practices. So he works within our level up system, and his job solely is to nurture the students. And what he'll do is he'll match you up with a mentor that practices your technique. It could be anywhere in the world, and you're going to learn your technique and the specifics of those procedures required to get great patient outcomes, and also a financial model that is clearly already working. And basically what Eric does, the nickname we have around the office is Cupid, because Eric's like creating this love connection, and it's not an avatar, it's not a mechanical thing, it's a love connection. He's like, hey, you would love this doctor, but you're going to need to move out of state, or you might need to pack your bags, go across the country. But if you want, we even have an office in the UK. You can go live in another country and learn this technique for 2 years in what we call the incubator. So the Cupid puts you in an incubator, you get to be nurtured and still grow until it's time to go open your own, and then you go and do that. So that's kind of like option two. Option one is the franchise. I don't love it. They're going to work you really hard. They're not going to teach you how to run a business, because then you're a great employee. But option two is you go in an incubator, someone who really wants you to learn. And the first thing you agree to is the date you're going to leave. And so that's what we do. And then option three is if you want to open your own practice. And I mentioned the 3 free videos. The other component to that is we have a program called 0 to 200, because at 200 visits a week, your practice should be hugely successful, flirting with or above $1 million. And there's people I've seen on stages saying, we're seeing 700-800 visits a week. I can't wait to break $1 million. I'm like, that jackass is collecting $20 a visit. Get him off the stage. Mm-hmm. This high volume, low fee model, it's dead. It just doesn't work long term. It burns chiropractors out. So again, for any new grads or anybody who's about to graduate, ask for the holidays, can I get 0 to 200? And it's a paint by number system, how to open a practice, who to talk to at the city, what the permits are, how you got to open, how to do a grand opening. But first you should do a soft opening, not a big grand opening, because if the first time you push the x-ray button or open your doors is your grand opening, it doesn't work, you're fucked. Like, there's no going backwards. So any restaurant will do a soft opening first, work out the kinks, friends, and family, and then you do the big launch. So there's just things like that. Like, we just rewritten a playbook for how to open your practices, where docs are opening with 100 new patients that start care. As opposed to 300 patients, 50 of them start. That's called scorched earth. You have 250 new patients that said no to your recommendations in the town you now live and practice in. Bad idea. Does that make sense? And it's rampant in our profession. So how do I get a high close rate of people that come in from my office and not have 250 people that said no, 50 that said yes? That's scorched earth, but how do I nurture this? So there's a whole process to that. And that's why we have a lot of students that graduate and jump right into the 0 to 200 program, or they work for somebody else and then they go and open their own practice. And what's cool is we've made that a paint by number system. We implement all the procedures. We talk about allodynia. What is that? We mentioned that earlier. It's basically when you're doing palpation on someone and they had no pain before, you palpate and they have pain. So a non-noxious stimulus creates a noxious response. That's a subluxation. That's a reason for care. But you have to know that you know that as a new grad. And that's why you do the exams the way we teach it, the procedures the way we do it. And that's why we've got a high conversion rate. And that's why Ryan collected $2 million in year number 2 and has consistently done that because it works. So 0 to 200 is that program. The other programs, if you want to be in Cupid, you talk to Eric Russell, but all that, just message me. And all of that is wrapped around the systems that James has taught, which is why this works so well. It's really helping the next generation in a big, big way. So awesome. Thank you for coming to the mic. Will you guys put your hands together? I love it. Thank you so much. You got time for one more, James? Sure. Yeah. All right. Stephanie, thank you for doing that. We have Claire. Is that right? Is Claire here? Claire Beck? Awesome. All right, one more time. Stand up. Put your hands together for Claire Beck. All right. Claire, go ahead and grab a seat. So Claire's question was, what are the best tips for a new graduate looking to get hired as an associate? In other words, what are the current DCs looking for in a graduate? Was that your question?
Yes, sir, that was.
Okay. And do you want to change that at all? Is there a variation of that? Anything you want to add?
Yeah, on the flip side,
Come a little closer to this.
On the flip side, what should I, as a new graduate in a year, look for in a company that could be beneficial? Because I would rather get some experience on my belt and then open up later on.
Yeah.
Just
Love that.
personal.
This is kind of what we were talking about, being in an incubator. But I think what's really critical is practicing with someone who has a technique that you want to practice like. So the first thing you would have to figure out is, how do you want to practice? And that might sound easy on the surface, but by getting adjusted in student clinic, getting adjusted off campus, how'd you get adjusted at home? Maybe you had a miracle in your family under chiropractic care. What was that style? And when I first came to chiropractic school, I didn't even know there was different techniques. I just thought everybody adjusted like my chiropractor back home. Does that make sense? So really just kind of understanding that, I think, is step one. And then one of the things Eric Russell does is he gives away questions to students that we write for the doctors to ask. He kind of gives the answers to the students. Like Eric Russell is all about the students. He loves them. And one of the things he said is, you got to ask a question of the employer. And one of the best questions you could ask is, what keeps you up at night and how can I help you with that? And when he told me that, I said, dude, I would love to be asked that. I've never been asked that. What keeps me up at night? How do I hired? Like, the fact you even care enough to know my perspective is completely different. The questions I get is, how many vacation weeks? Am I going to make $100,000? What's my bonus? When does medical kick in? Insurance, some of that stuff. And it's like, so I get it. That's your perspective. But the question that he suggests students ask is, what keeps you up at night and how can I help you? I'm like, hey, I'm going to hire a partner. I'm going to hire an advocate. I need more of those on my team. I think that's huge. So also some of those things, I think, where you kind of shift perspective and realize, hey, if I can be an asset here, I'll have a career as long as you want it. And I really think that makes for a much better situation for the student coming out of school. And then underpinning all of that is it the right technique for you? And that's the piece that students kind of have to show up ready to at least have an answer to, or be flexible on how they're going to be taught. But what I don't allow in my practice is I don't let the associate bring their technique with them. I teach my technique to the associate. I can't have 5 different techniques going on in there. It doesn't work. I need them to learn what we do. And that's a big one for the docs listening, is like, hey, this is the way forwards, is get a system that works for everybody, but it has to be uniform across the practice. Yeah.
I love that question, by the way. I hate to compliment Eric, but what I would say, if it was me hiring, or what I would suggest is, like, one of the things I'll tell you is that experiencing a busy practice is mind-blowing, because you don't believe right now that you can see, 20 people in an hour or 30 people an hour. You're like, that's no way. There must be rushed. There's not value in that care. You get told all this bullshit. Go to a practice. And I wouldn't hire somebody ever who hadn't been to seminars outside of school and been volunteering or working for a chiropractor, right? Because I only want keen. I don't want to babysit. I don't want somebody who's looking to basically just, get babied. I want somebody who's keen, who is, confident, who knows what they want, but has actually put in some work prior to getting out of school.
Yeah.
And I just can't, the question was, I'm walking off the stage or walking across the stage next week, or you've got a year. But it's like, listen, the one thing that separated us was that we who are hungry to learn about chiropractic and witness chiropractic offices before we graduated, and it saved us, right? And I mean, I don't think I could have been, more enthusiastic, but when I went and saw busy practices, it was probably the most and I know you do your fight camp, fight club. But it's like, you've got to get out there and, through Eric or Brad, and you've got to get into good practices, ethical, successful practices, and you've got to get involved. Because it'll change everything for you at school. All of a sudden you'll be like, this is why I'm going through this bullshit. And I can't wait to help people. And I know it's possible, because I always say the 4-minute mile, right? The 4-minute mile was not broken for decades. And after it got broken, it was broken every week for the next 50 years, right? As soon as it became possible. But your possible is that practice that you see, that you want.
Yeah.
And you've got to get involved with it. But my God, if your only education is sitting in that desk at school, you're in trouble.
So, and just so everybody knows that's here tonight, some of what we do is we take that roster, and if we have special invites, free seats to seminars or job applications, and you're here tonight, you're on the list, you immediately get moved to the top of the leaderboard. Because here's one of the things could you write this down? One of the things I would say is 90% of success is showing up in the right circles. It's showing up and in the right circles. That's 90% of success. The other 10% is you got to do the right things. But if you're not even willing to show up to a night like this or a podcast to ask James Chestnut your question, like, I'm sorry, I just don't have a lot of time. If you haven't been, we have level up clubs on campus. We have seminars. We do stuff like this. If you're not willing to show up and you call me out of the blue for a job, I don't know a lot about you. I can't vouch for you. But if you've been working with me and you're in Eric Russell's ear, Dr. Eric Russell, and he knows who you are, he can get you a job this week. Like we've done at our lunch at seminars, done a video conference with a doctor. And by the time we start back up after lunch, the job offer comes through within an hour for a student, and it's 6 figures. You have to be on the radar though. Does that make sense? And so know and be known, that's a really big thing. And Eric Russell's the guy, he doesn't get enough bribes, but he should. Because that's really and then we've also done student fight clubs. And so in my office, we blew out a wall. It's got a one-way glass mirror. If you didn't know about it, it's just because you haven't hung out in the right circle long enough. But we've got some invites for students to come in the practice and see exactly that. And that's what we're going to be doing. Yep.
I want work ethic,
Yeah.
and you got to be coachable.
Yeah.
Right? It's like any team. It's
Yeah.
like you got to have are you going to be the hardest worker?
Yeah.
And are you going to be coachable?
Yep.
And then you can be molded into anything.
Yep. And we've got Mikhail, Noah, you guys have been out to the practice, right? We've done screenings and stuff in the community. Have you guys come out to the office yet? Okay, well, you're coming. But we've done it. We've had students come out and do that stuff in the practice, in the community as well. So we've got a bunch of that stuff. It's just like, it's on the radar. The invites are out there. And the more you participate, the more you engage, the more you're going to get. So
I just remember, by the way, a good client of been to the seminars before, but his name is Dr. Jared Bowman, but one of his staff couldn't make it this weekend, so he asked if we could donate that to one of the students. So maybe at the end you guys or Dr. Russell could just draw a name or whatever to give, because we do have one free seat. I just came to my mind right now. So
I love it. So we're going to do one more question before we let James get dinner, and this one's going to be Josh Harrington, because I read his name earlier. But Claire, I want to give you a high five and say thank you. And I got the yes sir when you sat down. I love being in Texas. Yes sir. I'm like love dub over here. Put your hands together for Claire. Right on.
Thank you so much.
All right, Josh, we're going to feed Dr. Chestnut here. So we're going to keep your question quick. Do you remember what it was?
Can you remind me?
Oh, great. Oh, great.
Can you remind me, sir?
Sorry, yes,
Josh said, I plan on opening a practice when I get out of school. And if you were in my shoes, what would you do to focus on the foundation for a long-term success? What would you say is a good foundation for long-term success?
Well, I would say there's some very important questions, variables that determine success, right? It's not random chance. There's variables that determine success. So number one is certainly being an expert in the value of your product and services. There's just no doubt you can't get around. But I was talking actually to students last week, and I said, what are the reasons why people don't come to a chiropractor? Right? Like, what are the reasons? And what's the answer? Like, why do people walk by chiropractors and go get something that doesn't work?
We cause strokes.
Well, it's fear that it's dangerous or that it doesn't work. Like they believe it doesn't work. There's no evidence, or they're scared of it because they don't think it's safe. Is that about probably the primary?
Misinformed.
So understand what you're dealing with, right? Not the people who've showed up. Don't be selling safety and effectiveness to people who are already in your practice, because too many people do that, in my opinion, too, because they're already bought. Right. They've already got a value proposition. But the people out in your community, when you like whatever you're going to do, when you go do talks, like Brad's really good at teaching how to do that, and we're working on some content for that too. But it's just like just remember why people don't come see you, but and never let that creep into your belief system ever. You've got to be absolutely armed yourself, even if you don't want to confront that. You've got to be sure that you know those things, and then I think you've got to get people through the door. You've got to give people a phenomenal service with compassion and integrity, and you've got to charge a fair fee to make yourself successful financially. So what I would say is you need the foundation, which is the content, which I'm good at. You need to get them through the door. Talk to Brad, not me. When you get them in, you got to be efficient in how you deliver that care. And then you've got to somehow be able to get out into your community and just cast that net to get people, because they're not going to run to your door and bang on it. That's just reality. And so that's why I think Brad is so valuable, because most chiropractors, it doesn't matter how good you are if no one's coming through your door. And it doesn't matter how many people come through your door if you're not good at what you do when they get in there. And so you got to be both.
That's right. Yeah. And to me, I just think marketing's not a thing that you turn on and off. It should be a thing that's consistent.
Right.
And consistency wins. Consistency beats intensity for a new doc. So staying consistent also means you don't burn yourself out. And I think that's big. We do internal procedures. We're going to teach tomorrow best practices and how to turn referrals into new patients, from the re-exams, and how that should be clockwork within your practice. If you do it right, you'll never want to skip a re-exam. And a lot of the procedures that we do is based off of the stuff James shows and shares with pre and post, and the pre and the post test. So you have evidence of the changes. And what's cool about that is it's not your price, it's your proof. And if you have proof, you don't have to drop your price to get people to stay. Right. They stay because they know the evidence behind it. And really what we've been pushing is, teaching chiropractors the ongoing care is what's necessary, needed. If somebody's in enough pain, they'll say yes to your recommendations, no matter what they are. But ongoing care, that requires some time and some education. And if you do that correctly, that's the easier practice. Now, that's on the far side of complexity, but if we can get you there and all the science and the wellness that goes with it, then ultimately that's the better practice. And so those are people that come in asymptomatically. It's best for them. It's best for you. It requires a lot less time and energy from you. And so really being committed to the long game, at no point taking shortcuts. That's the best I can tell you. So they commit to the process, make the process fun, and then consistency through it versus intensity is massive.
Yes, sir.
And if it's an ongoing program that you're running in your office, it's how you do your talks, how you do your internal health classes, when you do your spinal screenings. It's all on rhythms and rituals. And if you get that dialed in, your practice has predictable growth, and then you have predictable income, and then you're stress-free. And that, to me, is the secret of success. It's like the predictability of it decreases stress. And the two things I want everybody to hear tonight before we wrap this up for the Parker students is the word success and fulfillment. You can have both. You can be successful with the money and the profits of your practice. We talked about Ryan Carlson doing $2 million. And then fulfillment is the part that you'll often hear James talk about. And those are the stories of the patients. And then this is what happened for the rest of her life. And then she went on to do, it's like, because that matters to us, success and fulfillment. It's not just one or the other. Right. It's kind of like science and philosophy. You can have both, and I think that's really big. To be fair, I invited Dr. Bill Morgan to sit down with us tonight. He's actually in Europe. He's at a seminar. He couldn't be here, but we would like to talk to the chiropractic school presidents and kind of get their perspectives and what they're doing differently and where they're going with it. I just want to have open dialogue and be like, hey, where's this going? Push that out to profession, but also sitting with the students and just getting your perspectives, because we hear the same questions all the time, like what makes a good school, what makes a good graduate, what makes it, and the truth is there is no one variable like this school 100% of them collect $1 million. It doesn't exist, right? There's no one school where all the students pass the boards. I'm sorry, those are the facts, and so what I like about that is the empowerment side of it is if you take control, then you'll have your success. If you agree to step up and do the work, then you can have whatever practice you want. And so that's a definition you got to fill in. And then, with what we do in Level Up and how we teach, that we can help you with all of that stuff. Certainly the 0 to 200 for grads opening their own practice, there is no better program in the profession. It's small office, big house. What I mean is low overhead, high volume. We've talked about, putting a gym inside your practice. It's like taking two bad ideas and meshing them together. It's like, chiropractors struggling to make it in chiropractic, so they open a gym inside their four walls. I'm like, that's not going to make it any more clear, and just really realizing the benefit of the adjustment. That's your go-to. That's your power stroke, is just adjustment-centric chiropractic care. I firmly believe that.
And don't ever define success without fulfillment or integrity. There is no success without fulfillment and integrity. You can't have it.
Can't have it.
You can have financial success, but that's not success.
Right.
So make sure you define what success is for you. And if it doesn't include, fulfillment and integrity, it's empty.
And I could tell you, he lives it. I mean, we do stuff, off camera, coffee and lunch and grabbing a glass of wine and cold beer. And it's like, he lives it wherever we go. It's like, did we settle the bill? Did we take care of the waiter? Did we, we do this? Or we do, it's like, it could be the Uber driver. We should tip that guy who did really well. It means I'm paying for the Uber. But, it's like, we should tip him really well. It's like, but it's always with integrity and it's always very fair. And what I love about teaching with them is any room we walk into, there's just great stories about them. Be that chiropractor. Be a chiropractor that kind of does it like Chestnut does it, where you walk in, there's high fives and hugs and accolades, and we can't even get started because we got to listen to all the great things that he's done. It's like, be that chiropractor. And that honestly is not that hard to do. It really is just having the integrity to do it long term, commit to the process, and all the stuff that we just shared in this episode. This 30-minute student episode that's now gone an hour.
Hey, Chestnut, you bait and switch, eh? Can you come and talk for 10 minutes?
Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you joining this special edition of the Chiro-Factor podcast for the students of Parker. Thank you guys for joining us.
I appreciate y'all's time.
Man. Thank you.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Hey everyone, that was a special edition of the Chiro-Factor. We've been helping students for many years, and a lot of times the things that we do are off the radar because my biggest interest is helping the docs, not necessarily talking about the products. In this particular episode, I think we made it clear. If you want to open your own practice, we can do that in the 0 to 200 Practice Accelerator. You get out of school, from graduation to opening your practice, do's and don'ts that are working, still work. My associate collected over $1 million his first 12 months and $2 million in the next 12 months. So if this sounds appealing to docs getting out and they don't want to struggle, let us know. We can help you out with that. If you want to go to the website, levelupmentoring.rocks, there's some information there. And if you want to be an associate, or as we say, an apprentice, you'll be paid to learn from someone that is high integrity, great office management skills. And within a couple of years, you will have run the systems that you're going to run in your practice. But again, you'll be paid to learn. And that would be Dr. Eric Russell and myself helping you find a practice in what we call the Cupid model, because he creates the love connection. Hey docs, until next time, please enjoy this episode of the Chiro-Factor.